The mining of panels 9 and 10 at the Taraba colliery have been surrounded by controversy, with fear that not only would houses in the Marmong Point area be damaged by subsidence, but also the main northern rail line. But results released today by the Monitoring Liaison Committee show subsidence under the rail line at Taraba has stabilised at 390 millimetres without damaging the track.
All of the advice I've had is that there will be no further subsidence under the railway line.
Strains to the rail line caused by subsidence have been measured daily and the tracks de-stressed as needed. Ground surveys and inspections have also monitored the effect of subsidence. Mr Morris says State Rail will shortly lift its speed restrictions on the track, returning timetables to normal. But although the train line may have escaped damage, some homes in the area have not. According to the local Progress Association, the same longwall panel has damaged around 50 houses in the Marmong Point and Wood Rising areas.
A 400 or more millimetre subsidence at Wood Rising did cause superficial damage to the houses, but a crack in the wall when it's your castle does mean something. A hairline crack in the bank of the railway line, probably the embankment supporting the line, probably means nothing.
Great teamwork.
Mike Johnson, another three. He makes it! 2 from 2 from Michael Johnson outside the... A familiar sight to fans, teammates and oppositions alike. Michael Johnson has been shooting the lights out of every stadium in the nation. On Saturday night, MJ will trot out onto the floor of the Ken Booth Forum, the 250th time in his career in the NBL that he has done so, a milestone that never entered his mind in 1982.
I came down in 82 for 1 year, and then I was going to go home to Brisbane. I was just going to break into the league down here because I like the atmosphere here, and as I said, go home at the end of that year, and I'm still here 10 years later. So I didn't really think I'd be here for 250, but I'm glad that I have been, and I've enjoyed it.
In those 10 years, Michael has scored an amazing 5,712 points at an average of 22.9 per game, represented Australia at youth and senior levels from 1980 to 83 and 84, 85 and 87 respectively, and been named New South Wales Basketballer of the Year on 2 occasions. But there, amongst all the achievements, a touch of sadness.
Very disappointed that I didn't make an Olympics or World Championship. Those things passed me by, but I've just enjoyed playing with the Falcons in general.
By the same token, there have been many highlights.
Well, the Kmart Classic win in '88, the pre-season tournament win when we were expected to finish near the bottom of the ladder for the year, and we started off with a spectacular win over Perth. In that Classic, I think that would be one of the highlights, and of course the playoffs I played in '84 and '85.
But most Newcastle fans will remember the career of Michael Johnson for 2 specific games that he won on his own. Nuttawading in '82 and in 1988 he sunk the Wildcats.
The Hunter Valley wine industry is worth $150 million each year, and according to the Department of Agriculture, that's a business that simply isn't worth jeopardising. Strict quarantine measures exist to keep the area pest and disease free, but the number one enemy is a tiny aphid called phylloxera. Phylloxera has wiped out wine areas in America, France and also in Australia in northern Victoria. The bug attacks the roots of the vine, killing the plant.
It can actually be very devastating, and the example is in northeast Victoria where it was introduced over 100 years ago, and now that area can only grow grapevines in phylloxerated soil with using resistant rootstocks. So virtually it means that vines would have to be replanted.
The Department of Agriculture says the problem isn't with established vignerons. They're aware of how devastating the pests can be. The department says it's hobby farmers that represent the real threat. People should be especially wary with plans from the outskirts of Sydney. When bringing in any vines, they must get an official OK or face a fine of $1,000. Local wine growers say people shouldn't overreact, just be careful.
This is a very important wine industry in Australian and world terms in the Hunter Valley, so we can't be taking any risks at all.
Mark Cook was able to sit up in bed this morning and show where the fin of his board slashed his abdomen.
I just wiped out and I just went down with the board and it hit the bottom of the sand and then I fell on top of the board.
He knew instantly something was seriously wrong.
Yeah, I put my hand down and felt the hole in my wetsuit and then I felt everything else. My intestines were coming out of my body.
Amazingly, Mark was able to paddle close enough to the shore to raise the alarm. His friend Wayne McGann stripped down and swam the 40 metres to help.
I was in a bit of shock, I think, but he sort of still knew what he was doing, so I just helped him and that was all.
He was airlifted to the John Hunter Hospital where doctors operated, checking for internal injuries and stitching the wound. Mark says his injuries would have been far worse if he hadn't been wearing a wetsuit.
My intestines would have been hanging out everywhere, but they stayed inside my wetsuit, so that was pretty cool.
And when does he think he'll be able to face his board again?
Couple of weeks.
Doesn't frighten you off?
No, be good, it'd be a challenge to get back on it.
Newcastle went to the football stadium chock full of confidence after thrashing the Rabbitohs last week, and although he scored early, there wasn't any panic and the Knights replied fairly quickly. Coach David Waite was pleased but unhappy with a couple of aspects.
A very strong defensive performance, a bit like the days of old. It was at the stadium yesterday and we were very happy with that. We worked hard on it. We were a bit scratchy with the ball yesterday and we'll do a little bit of work on that for Friday night.
There's no doubting the change in attacking style has been the talking point for the past fortnight, and yesterday it again worked well, with Adrian Bronker and Mark Glanville on the top of their games.
Adrian's going very, very well, and I think he's just reaping the rewards of consistently holding down that position and learning the game in first grade. Mark is an amazing athlete, and mentally and physically. He hasn't missed a game this year, and he just keeps on doing the same thing each week, and they're an absolute joy to coach.
Although well out of the race for the semi-finals, the Knights can do some damage to Canterbury's hopes for 91 on Friday night at the ISC.
There won't need to be much said at all in the dressing room before Friday night or during this week's build-up to the Canterbury game. A few of us have connections with Canterbury. They've got plenty to lose, we've got nothing to lose, and we're looking forward to going out in our last home game on a very high note.
At centre stage of the development on the western side of Scone near the aerodrome is a $6 million track which, when complete, will probably be the most technologically advanced in the country. The 1,900 metre track has been planned from the ground up with cambered curves to reduce strain on the gallopers. It will be covered with blended frost-resistant turfs and be fitted with a pop-up sprinkler system requiring 10 kilometres of irrigation tubing. A 5-year plan should also see the establishment on an adjoining site of a $10 million TAFE college specialising in equine research.
One could imagine that with the passing of 4 or 5 years we might see everything that a racecourse should have. And of course all the other facilities like the TAFE and possibly a motel site, possibly pre-training establishments will all be here by that time.
Along with government funding of $4 million, developers hope to sell nearby parcels of land to horse trainers, and many, such as the Mayfield Smiths of the business, along with local racing identities, inspected the site on Monday. Can you see it taking off as a training camp for other trainers from Sydney?
I think so, yeah. I think everyone's in this, in the same boat as far as we're very limited on space, so It's much like me, I think everyone could benefit from having a centre here.
Scone track itself is a very ordinary track really. It's a small track and owners didn't like bringing their horses there to race there, and probably Sydney horses wouldn't come there much.
The old Scone racetrack at White Park has now been outgrown by the burgeoning industry it helped to foster. It's hoped that the new course will put Scone back on track for a busy racing calendar and big prize money. Race commentator John Tapp tips the new development will be a success.
It's as good as anything you're going to see in the world. I'm quite sure that amenities and the race day atmosphere will be as good as anything you see in the world. The idea now is to get people to Scone.
The racetrack should be open for the Scone Cup in May 1993. Andrew Lobb reporting for NBN News.
Ward 9 of Morisset Hospital is a 14-bed unit for geriatric psychiatric patients. It is also used as a medical ward. You know that the health budget is in serious trouble when services for psychiatric patients are withdrawn, and it seems that's exactly what's about to happen here. Ward 9 has been targeted for closure as a way of making up a $600,000 shortfall in the annual budget.
Because we are given a budget like every health service, and this year our budget will be reduced by 1.5% for productivity saving, the same as every other health service, every other mental health service in the state, and we have to make sure that our expenditure this financial year does not exceed the budget we are given.
Professor Morris says he hopes all but one of the patients in Ward 9 will be transferred to the Allendale Hospital. However, a copy of a letter from staff to the professor says approximately 5 of the patients in Ward 9 have already been tried at nursing homes. The exercise failed due to their aggressive or noisy behaviour. If it didn't work then, why will it work now?
Because there are nursing homes and nursing homes, and some may have been smaller and privately run and perhaps found it more difficult to accommodate such patients. We will also provide psychogeriatrician consultancy to Allendale to recommend ways of managing these sometimes difficult patients.
Professor Morris met with hospital staff this afternoon to discuss the possible closure of Ward 9. He says that if guarantees can be obtained that all patients can be relocated, the ward will be closed. Jane Anderson, NBN News.
It's thought the blaze started when vandals set fire to several rubbish bins. The club's loading dock was badly burnt, but firefighters managed to put out the flames before they reached nearby gas equipment. Heat from the fire cracked a brick wall and burnt through floorboards. Club Secretary Ned O'Brien estimates the damage bill to be around $10,000. The club is insured and will continue trading as normal. Club members spent the morning cleaning up and checking the extent of the damage. They believe the fire, which started in garbage bins outside the club's loading bay, was part of a spree of vandalism in the suburb overnight.
In the area around New Lambton Bowling Club, there were 16 whiz bins set alight in the early hours of the morning, and they were all that were recorded. There could have been a lot more that were not recorded.
Firefighters were alerted just after 3 o'clock this morning, and they took just 17 minutes to put out the flames. The quick response stopped the blaze reaching nearby gas equipment.
It would have blew the club clean off the face of the earth. We might have got a new club then.
The flames cracked a brick wall and burnt through floorboards, causing damage thought to be worth around $10,000. The club was insured and will continue trading as normal.
Since it was built more than 100 years ago, St Andrew's Presbyterian Church has stood out on the Newcastle skyline. But after the sandstone steeple toppled during the earthquake, the prominent landmark has remained encased in scaffolding. After a year of repair work, the steeple has been rebuilt and the wrought iron spire lifted into place this morning. It's been an expensive exercise for the congregation of St Andrews. They've had to dig deep and find $270,000, while insurance has paid for repairs worth around $800,000. Although a new church and hall could have been bought with that money, demolishing St Andrews was never an option.
It means a lot to retain the heritage of Newcastle and retain old buildings. This is a Menskins building, it's world renowned, and we appreciate it being restored.
Along with general earthquake repairs, much needed restoration is also being carried out. In a few weeks, the bell of St Andrews will chime. Apart from the occasional knock with a workman's hammer, it will be the first time the bell has rung in over 40 years.
And if you go back a few years ago, we had a terminal with white ants in the tower, and we had to reconstruct the bell with steel cables and structure up there. Now we can remove all that, and once again we'll be able to ring the bell.
The green train, please.
It's a 12-week journey for the green train, taking in 32 centres around New South Wales. More than 1,000 students took the tour today, learning the do's and don'ts of keeping the environment in good shape.
The basic concept is the theme that you can make a difference.
It's estimated 20% of the world's population use 80% of its natural resources, Australia being one of the greatest consumers. The students learn simple things like wearing a jumper instead of using a heater, or using string shopping bags rather than throwaway plastic bags can mean great savings for the planet. 10 local schools were awarded prizes for their forward thinking in keeping their schoolyards environmentally sound with tree planting programs. The green train will be in Singleton tomorrow before moving on to Muswellbrook.
Adrian Bronker is one Queensland boy who escaped from the Broncos corral. A snap decision brought him to Newcastle last year. A chance to play in the centres has led to a permanent first-grade spot and the best form of his short career.
A couple of months ago I was just going up and down from first grade to reserve grade. Basically, if you made a mistake, you sort of go back down to reserve grade. It doesn't help your confidence much, but now I'm getting a few consecutive games, one after another. You get more confidence and you're not worried about making any mistakes, and you do a few things that you wouldn't have done before.
With 5 tries to his credit in the last 3 weeks, no one is disputing his right to claim any position he likes. Despite a backline reshuffle, Bronker stays in the centres alongside Glenn Miller. Tony Herman comes onto the wing for the injured Brad Godden, and Ashley Gordon moves back to fullback. The forward pack remains unchanged.
The Australian Safari is rated as one of the toughest rallies in the world, and contestants were doing it hard at Bushy Creek near Alice Springs. David and Kate Officer's Mitsubishi at one stage held a 23-minute lead, but that's been trimmed to just 6 minutes, with Victorian Andy Stott and Brisbane's Jim Rediex hard on their heels. 9 out of 40 cars in the rally have been forced to drop out, 30 of 70 bikes. The competitors will leave the spectacular Alice Springs leg tomorrow, travelling northwest into the Pilbara and the finish in Darwin on Sunday.